In this episode, with Deputy Chief Larry Cocco, we delve into the critical role of community risk reduction in the fire service. We discuss the adoption of evidence-based and results-oriented strategies to enhance fire prevention and the significance of regular training and updating enforcement protocols. The conversation also covers the innovative use of technology and data in shaping decision-making and improving service delivery. We tackle the challenges posed by new risks like lithium-ion batteries and stress the necessity of updating codes and continuous education. Join us as we explore how collaboration and knowledge sharing are pivotal in advancing fire safety practices. Chief Coco, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having this great conversation today.
Yeah, we just recently met at the California Fire Prevention Institute. We were talking a little bit about that offline here. And you came down and you taught one of the community risk reduction classes on Friday. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it was my first opportunity to come to your lovely state of California. I'm embarrassed to say that. It took me that many years for me to make it to California.
Well, and you didn't, you picked probably one of the worst locations to come to in Santa Barbara. Obviously, speaking sarcastically, that's probably one of the most beautiful spots in the state of California.
It is beautiful. It was a beautiful location, a great conference, and quite frankly, I would have come to California sooner if I knew it looked that great. So,
well, we'll have to make sure to keep you on the invite list for next year's CFPI. I believe the dates are already out there. I think they're probably going to be looking for more instructors. So, if you want to teach another CRR class, I'm sure they're always looking.
I'll reluctantly go. The view's bad, but I'll reluctantly go for sure if the invite comes. So,
the area where it's hosted, couldn't be in a worse location. I mean, right on the beach or anything. So,
for sure, it's beautiful. It truly is.
Well, Chief Coco, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. We always start the podcast with our guests sharing a little bit about their background. Can you share a little bit about your background and your journey through the Toronto Fire Service and really what drew you to community risk reduction?
Sure. I'd love to have that discussion. I actually started my career in the fire service at the Ontario Fire Marshal's office in the early 2000s, and it's a little different jurisdiction than the United States. So the Ontario Fire Marshal's office is very similar to the ATF. They're mandated to investigate major incidents, fatalities, explosions, and fires of significance for the entire province. So I started my career as a frontline forensic fire investigator, and I had the pleasure of traveling the entire province of Ontario, which I think is similar. I don't know the size to California, but Ontario is very big. I could say that from one end to the other, I would have to fly on a regular basis.
Oh, wow.
And some of my early fires, I remember being told, pack a sleeping bag and bring some MREs because you're sleeping in a nursing station with no running water. So those were some of my early challenges. I really enjoyed, learning forensic fire investigations. And at the fire marshal's office, I was then promoted to major case supervisor. And after 4 years in that role, I got promoted to management, and I ran the quality assurance, risk management, and major case team, which was a bunch of forensic engineers and major case supervisors. And I had the privilege of being involved in major incidents across the province and involved in multiple criminal investigations and inquests and inquiries. And during my journey, I was fortunate enough to be qualified as an expert at witness in forensic investigations.
Okay.
I could tell you I had no intention of joining a fire service. I really didn't. If you had asked me 30 years ago, you would be the deputy fire chief of the largest Canadian fire service, I probably would have laughed at you. Fast forward to 2016, a recruiter reached out and said, Toronto Fire is looking to recruit a new division chief role to start three new divisions. So fire investigations, for fire protection engineering, and quality assurance legal.
Okay.
So I had no understanding of what was going on. So I made some inquiries, found out these divisions weren't staffed. They had no resources, no policies, procedures. And I had the conversation and I said, well, this is an opportunity to try something different and a
Hmm.
challenge. And if I would have known how much of a challenge, I probably wouldn't have put my name forward. Anyways, fast forward, I competed, I was successful, and I joined the organization. And what drew me to that was the provincial fire marshal did the investigation into origin and cause, but in
Okay.
Ontario, the local fire service is the authority having jurisdiction for enforcement. So what frustrated me early on in my career is we would do these comprehensive investigations and figure out origin cause,
Hmm.
but we had no influence over the code enforcement.
Oh, okay.
So this coming to a Toronto Fire as and being an AHJ, I had the best of both worlds. I could be
Hmm.
involved in origin cause, but also the circumstances. And when I
Right.
mean circumstances, not the circumstances of how the ignition source got to the first fuel, but more how could we use this information to prevent future incidents? Does the code need to be amended? Is there violations of the fire code? Can we do enforcement? Can we change behavior from general deterrence? And I'll talk about later what kind of tools we have for enforcement. We're very unfortunate. So fast forward, I did that role for 4 years, and then I was graciously enough to be promoted to the deputy fire chief of community risk reduction, and currently that's around 272 members.
Wow.
180 approximately inspectors and inspections and enforcement, a team of 5 fire protection engineers, 11 fire investigators, 30 public educators, 7 staff in professional development, and 7 staff in QA legal.
Wow. That
Yes.
is yeah. I would imagine anyone that's either listening or watching this would like to have those types of numbers in their community risk reduction division. I guess my next question would be is, in comparison to maybe the operations side of things, how many firefighters are there online, operationally, compared to maybe the community risk reduction staff? You said you had 220. How many firefighters does the city of Toronto have?
So we're total complement is about 3,250, and we have
Okay.
approximately 27 in frontline operations. Our CRR team's around 270 or 10% of operations. It is a very large CRR team.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, it was not done by fluke. It was done by using evidence-based data and
Hmm.
showing the risk and the importance of inspections and enforcement and public education. Um, we have a philosophy here on the 3 lines of defense. So, first line of defense is public education. You educate people on fire safe behavior. The second line is code and code enforcement. So, we all
Hmm.
know that buildings that are in compliance with the code decrease the likelihood of serious injury or death because
Right.
of the tenements of fire safety,
Hmm.
detection, egress, compartmentalization. And if people don't want to comply with the code, we have some hefty protocols for enforcement. And when that fails, line one and line two, then we have our emergency response.
Yeah.
So um, we're big proponents in Toronto Fire of results-based accountability.
Hmm.
It's not a matter of asking for the sake of asking. It's evidence-based approach to service levels. And in Toronto, the legislation states that the service level is dictated by community, the council,
Hmm.
the elected officials. And we're very fortunate here in Toronto to have elected officials that truly believe in the importance of inspections and enforcement. And we submitted business cases based on sound analytical data and risk
Hmm.
based information, and we've been slowly growing our division. And that's why we have approximately 270 staff in the community risk reduction division.
Well,
Um,
Yeah, you highlight the importance of a community risk assessment, right? So many departments, and we've talked a lot about this on this podcast, is the importance of that community risk assessment and how important that is to be able to show the evidence of what those hazards are in your community and how you can better prioritize and then mitigate them. And it sounds like you guys have definitely gone through that journey quite extensively.
Yeah, and so to backtrack, the provincial government mandated a CRA to every fire service. And I'm gonna test my memory here. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, and we have to do an annual assessment. We actually just finished our annual assessment for 2023. However, what's interesting is Toronto Fire is a accredited agency under CFAI.
Okay.
And we went under that journey 2019. It was a tremendous amount of work. However, it's so important because the Commission of Fire Accreditation International assesses a fire service on a whole bunch of benchmarks, and you have to
Hmm.
achieve the benchmarks, and it's independently peer reviewed. And what's really nice about the CFAI journey is it tells you things about your agency that you don't know,
Yeah.
and it forces you to kind of look behind the curtain and
Hmm.
be really real with your service level. So here's our mantra. So myself and all my division chiefs and CRR, we ask 3 questions every time we decide to do something. Number one, how much are we doing? Number two, how well are we doing in delivering how much? Number three, is the community better off?
Mm.
If you can't answer all 3 of those questions, we're not doing that activity.
Right.
So years ago, Tim, as you probably recall being in the industry, we were fixated on saying we did X amount of inspections.
Yep.
Okay, well, tell me how well you did those inspections.
Exactly.
I don't know. And more importantly, the community spending all of these funds to deliver this service level. How do you know if they're better off?
Hmm.
So in taking that principle of results-based accountability, we have built in metrics and dashboards in our CRR dashboard, and real time, I can monitor our performance right down to the inspector level. And in comparison to our service levels that council has mandated us to do, I'll give you an example. Um, in the city of Toronto, we have approximately 3,060 residential high rises.
Oh,
So that's 6 floors and above.
right.
So City Council has mandated Toronto Fire Services to undertake a comprehensive inspection on every high rise annually.
Okay.
So right off the bat, there's 3,060 inspections we have to do. We're mandated by law to inspect vulnerable occupancies, retirement
Hmm.
homes, long care, and hospital. There's approximately another 360 right off the bat. We're
Right.
also mandated to inspect all licensed rooming houses.
Okay.
So that's about 450, and a new bylaw came into effect that's going to open it off across the city, and we're anticipating 1,000 plus of new rooming houses. That's our service level audit. So before January, as soon as January 1st hits, I
Hmm.
know my work level right there. And then we add in one wild card. The law in Ontario is we have to conduct assessments and inspections of any fire safety complaint received by the chief fire official.
Okay.
That can be anywhere between 6 to 10,000 a year. So, give you an example. Last year we did 21,000 inspections
Just with 21,000 inspections in total, or
total.
21,000 complaint inspections.
Total with between the service level and complaints. I think we
Wow.
were, yeah, and that doesn't include enforcement activities, which I can explain as
Yeah.
well. We're very fortunate in Ontario. We have extremely powerful authorities and a lot of deterrence in enforcement.
Hmm.
So, to give you an example, first offense for a violation of the fire code, the maximum fine for an individual is 50,000 per offense, up to 50,000. If you are a repeat offender, the maximum fine increases to 100,000 per violation. If you are a corporation, the maximum fine per first offense is $500,000. If you are a repeat offender as a corporation, it's maximum fine 1.5 million, all in, and up to a year in jail.
Oh my
That's
God.
rare. That's really rare, but the code allows for it for egregious violations of repeat offenders under the fire code. Um, and we have, we're fortunate. The city of Toronto provides us three dedicated prosecutors that do our prosecutions, and they have done a fabulous job of demonstrating the importance of the fire code compliance.
Hmm.
And when you have a fiduciary duty and put people in harm's way, there we advocate and get stiff penalties.
Right.
Uh,
Now, I would imagine that to be able to get to that penalty phase, you have typically exhausted all educational efforts and all inspection efforts to be able to get to that penalty phase. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So we have a protocol here that I instituted at Toronto Fire to have consistency. So one of the benchmarks of service delivery is like I'll use a popular chain, McDonald's. If
Hmm.
you go to McDonald's and you order a Big Mac, it doesn't matter what city you're in, you expect to get a Big Mac that
Right.
tastes the same.
Yep.
Well, because we're so large and then we have 25 inspection offices, I wanted to ensure consistency in our enforcement of the code. So we have a policy at Toronto Fire Services where there's a list of violations that are egregious that result in mandatory enforcement. There is no
Okay.
exceptions. So,
Okay.
for example, one of the egregious ones would be a blocked exit doorway. You're getting
Hmm.
charged. A lack of a smoke alarm. You're getting charged. Non-functioning fire alarm system. You're getting charged. They are stipulated in policy, and that is a consistent application across the city.
Okay.
And what's happened, coupled that with our mandatory inspection process that we instituted in 2016 of high rises,
Hmm.
we have educated building owners and operators. They know we're coming,
Hmm.
they know what to expect,
Right.
and they know if they're in non-compliance, they'll be charged. So at first, we saw a huge influx of violations and enforcement, and as time went on, our annual inspections saw increased compliance,
Yep.
less violations, and we'd show up and the building's completely compliant.
Wow.
Sorry, yeah.
Oh no, that's just amazing. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine though that the penalties were, they're set at a rate that would definitely drive that compliance. That's for sure.
Yeah, like a couple weekends ago, we had a total resolution on one property owner of $283,000. So that's enough to kind of change behavior,
Yeah.
especially when you're in a position of a fiduciary position
Hmm.
that you are receiving money to house people and you need to ensure they're not in harm's way.
Yeah.
The courts in Ontario take that seriously, and we're fortunate that we have provide the evidence and the documentation to show the significance. It's part of an education process as well. Like the
Hmm.
fire code is a great piece of legislation, but it's not something to be dismissed.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah, it's just not one of those guys. A lot of people. We talked a little bit, or you talked a little bit earlier about fire investigations and NFPA 921 being a guideline. The fire code is not a guideline, right? These are minimum standards for the level of safety that everybody needs to comply with. I do want to ask a follow up question in regards to your CRR dashboard and how you measure maybe like the quality of inspection or the quality of those CRR metrics through that dashboard. Is that dashboard available on your website, or is that just an internal dashboard that you're able to view and kind of see how things are improving or where things are at?
great question. So I'll start off by saying the dashboard's internal. It's for only for TFS staff, and Toronto is very fortunate because we have an in-house team of dedicated analysts. We have an analytics division
Hmm.
led by an amazing division chief that is all about analytics and data management. So early on in our journey, we asked for a CRR dashboard, and the analytics team spent a ton of time putting it together. And it's a real-time dashboard, so I can
Okay.
see service level, high rise, for example. I could tell you real time right now where we are in our percentage of completion by year end. Are we on target? So what month are we? April. We're
Hmm.
4 months in. I would expect that we should see approximately 35% of the service level completed now, right? Because we're
Right.
we're already and I can see it real time. In regards to performance, we've implemented a bunch of measures and it's mandatory file reviews.
Okay.
So every file that is closed is mandatorily reviewed by the supervisor. We also do something a little different, and that is any legal file goes through an independent legal review by our quality assurance team. If it
Okay.
doesn't meet the standard of care, it's not submitted for enforcement. It's not sworn before the court. That's
Okay.
number one. Number two is we do two random file reviews from an independent office from the inspector's office randomly. We pull two files and we want to see it's not about performance in regards to discipline, it's about performance of quality.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we look at these case reviews and we track trends of common errors or unique situations. So we make a decision. Is this issue isolated to the individual inspector and we recommend supplementary training, or is it systemic across the division? Do we need to implement division training?
Right.
Every year we tabulate that data and we look for opportunities for improvement. So I'll give you an example. Last year, of all the cases submitted, about major cases for enforcement, we processed 88% of those, and they were sworn before the courts.
Okay.
Years previously, we were coming in around 50 to 60%. So we've shown with the consistency in the training and the case reviews that we've increased the quality, and it's a direct attribute. It shows the results-based accountability. What we're doing is working because the quality is improving,
Mm-hmm.
and we're helping our staff be the best that they can be. Again, quality
Yeah.
assurance cannot be discipline. It's
Right.
about continuous improvement. So,
Now, your pathway to get there, obviously this didn't happen overnight, right? The pathway to get from, just measuring your metrics or measuring your progress based on inspection numbers to now having this CRR dashboard and doing these quality assurance reviews. What did that, how long did it take? And kind of, what was the pathway to get there?
so it was a challenging pathway. When I was new to Toronto Fire Services, I implemented the quality assurance review process in 2016 as a division chief. Change is never easy. Change is challenging. At first, it was, I have to give credit to the association, the union, because I had met with them and explained what I was trying to do. And I assured them
Mhm.
that this process was not about discipline, it was about continuous improvement and making our team the best they could be. At
Right.
first, it was very difficult to achieve buy-in because I was external to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
This was an external concept, but over time, the old saying is deeds speak. Actions
Yeah.
are louder than words. And
Yep.
as they realized we were there to help them and strengthen training and bring a regimented training protocol in place, a matrix, if you want to say, everyone gets the same amount of training and it's highly quantified. It showed that we were there to help them do the best they could do in files. And that journey, I would say 5 years, 5 years to get everyone trained the same, everyone to buy into the culture of continuous improvement and quality assurance, and showed them that quality assurance is an armor for them. We
Mm-hmm.
put a hard hat to go into a fire scene to
Right.
protect our head. So what I had to do is explain that the quality assurance process was no different than a hard hat or PPE. It was there to protect them.
Yeah.
And it's been very successful. And now all the district chiefs and division chiefs, everyone thinks that way.
Mm-hmm.
We're always about continuous improvement. How can we lessons learned, tweak our process, help staff? And the moment as an organization you say there's nothing more you can do, you're perfect, sadly, it's time to leave
Yeah.
because there's
Yep.
always opportunities, emerging trends, emerging issues. Something came across my desk today that was like I had never seen before. And it's an opportunity to look at it. Is it isolated or is it systemic?
Right.
And answer those three questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's a remarkable journey, to be able to get there in 5 years and be able to implement that quality improvement or quality assurance to verify that you're looking at the things that matter, right? Not just numbers on a paper, but you're looking at things that matter. Yes, it's important that we complete those things, but also too, how are we completing those things, and what impacts are we having on our community? Are we reducing that risk? Are we improving the lives of our citizens? You mentioned training, and one of the things we talked a little bit briefly about this before we started recording. You just recently graduated 25 new fire inspectors through an academy. I want to talk a little bit about that training process, and then also to your annual training. Here in the States, a lot of fire agencies are always, our training budgets are typically very small, and we do the best that we can. We always look for training opportunities to be able to increase that annually. But I would also like to hear how things are done in Canada to be able to ensure that we talk about emerging trends and those types of things. How you stay up to date, or how inspection staff stay up to date on some of those items.
So that's a great question. So I'll start with the first answer, 25 recruit class of last Friday. And that was a culmination of a 13-week training process. And 25 is a significant class. Due to transfers and retirement, we had this huge vacancy, and we did this massive recruitment. We're on average, we recruit anywhere 10 to 15. This was a little bit on the outlier of 25. 13-week process. Every inspector graduated with NFPA 1031 and 1035 qualifications, but also they undergo a intense 4-week enforcement guideline course that was in-house developed by Toronto Fire. We spent, when I first got here, I'll just show you, we spent 3 years developing this 400-page guidebook on how to effectively enforce the fire code. And our new recruits get the privilege of 4 weeks of intense training on enforcement, but we break it up and they get 1 week of placement. They come back to school and then they do another week of placement. So they get a little bit of practical application.
Okay.
So that also is, once they graduate and they go in the field, there's a 1-year follow-up training process where they have monthly progress reports. Every TFS member has minimum training quals in order to be in their role and also to be promoted into the role of captain. So
Okay.
we are big firm believers of NFPA, and every position has requirements. Like, I'll give you an example. Our fire investigators have to be 1031, 1033, 1035, 1041, 1072, and they also
Wow.
need their official building code, provincial government building code certified building official in both general legal and building construction.
Oh, wow.
So we offer a significant amount of training, and
Yeah.
every year there's no lack of training required. Ongoing professional development, training to get people in position to be competing for promotions.
Mm-hmm.
We're big believers of NFPA, and we're fortunate. The Ontario Fire Marshal is the authority having jurisdiction, and they've granted us the ability to teach our own staff.
Okay.
So we have 7 members of our professional development, and all they do, they're all captains, all they do is train CRR staff
Okay.
and do a fantastic job doing it.
Yeah, so they're your training cadre, right? For
Yes.
those new inspectors that come in. That's amazing that you train your fire investigators to be, building officials, or at least train them in the aspect of being a building official to better understand. I know when I was a fire investigator, I was also a fire inspector. To be able to have that experience from a fire inspector to a fire investigator, I really said I thought it was invaluable. Because then I could talk about, if I was talking to a customer about a fire inspection, I could talk about fire behavior, and I've seen how these things, this violation could cause, something else to happen. But as a fire investigator, being able to see the passive fire protection systems and the impacts that they had on a given fire, and it didn't spread, like a townhome fire didn't spread to adjacent townhome because of that firewall that stopped it from moving forward.
Absolutely. And even our captains in the inspections and enforcement, all the 25 area offices, they all have to be certified under the building code as well.
Okay.
So that it helps us in the delivering of our service, because the building code and the fire code in Ontario are companion documents.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned origin, cause, and circumstances. So
Yeah.
how do you know if there's a gap in code if you don't know the codes?
Right.
So we have been very successful in using evidence-based data to advocate the government for code change, not just to say, please change it because we want to. We actually are in the position to present data and say,
Mm-hmm.
here's an example of this gap in 100 fires, for example. And here's our comprehensive investigation. Here's the gap. This is what we've done in engineering analysis. We highly recommend code amendment, and then we leave it to the government officials. Either they're going to agree or disagree. But
Mm-hmm.
as you know, if you have a very sound position backed by data and evidence, it's pretty hard to refute the request, especially when fire safety is in order. So
Yeah.
we've had a long track record at TFS just by the nature of our size
Mm-hmm.
and exposure that we get the opportunity. But with our dashboard, advanced investigations, and our inspections tracking, we have a wealth of data we can actually draw upon. And the old saying is, if you're not measuring it, you're not doing it.
Right.
But you can't start a process without thinking of your end result. So when
Mm-hmm.
you build a new process, you have to think, what am I trying to measure? What metrics do I want to need? Because you need to collect those tidbits of data. And if you don't have a system, that was a challenge on its own, and we're still
Yeah.
working on that. There is no commercial supplier that is able to meet the uniqueness of the Ontario Fire Code readily available. So we have our own in-house system that we worked with a company, and it's called One Step. And
Okay.
we've just launched and advanced it to modernize it. But that journey is constant because there's
Mm-hmm.
new risks. I'll give you an example. I think California has the same problem. Encampments.
Oh yeah.
Encampments don't
Yeah.
fall under the Ontario Fire Code.
Right.
So
No,
we
not at
had
all.
no way of tracking our risks. So we had put together a process in our dashboard, and I can tell you real time. I can log in and tell you where and how many encampments we've had year to date. So you have to be a bit comfortable with pivoting.
Mm-hmm.
The risk and fire incidents don't schedule when they show
Right.
up, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to be nimble and say, okay, this is a new emerging risk. How do we deal with it? How do we document it? How do we track it? But more importantly, how do we deliver that service? So
Yeah. Now you mentioned we've talked about that dashboard, and no commercial application is out there right now that somebody could buy it off the shelf, right, and then implement it. But in working with the company One Step, is that something that Toronto Fire and One Step is looking at, maybe doing something where, because I would imagine that there's many CRR departments out there that are also, they're probably listening to this and saying, man, that would be fantastic to have in my department. Is there a way that that could be commercially available to others?
I would think so. I would think so. It's just, the uniqueness about our
Yeah.
program is we do these comprehensive investigations and we also do code enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the challenging part. The Ontario Fire Code is so unique and there's so many nuances to it that
Yeah.
we had no choice but to do this in-house solution, and
Yeah.
it's worked out really well for us. That now
Right.
the journey was wasn't great, wasn't easy, and
Right.
in a perfect world, wouldn't it be great that divisions within a city could communicate? We could see the
Yes.
Toronto building, but in reality, those are technology gaps. And I'm talking to my colleagues. This is a common problem across the industry,
Yeah.
technology.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, with perseverance and time, we've been able to find solutions that work for us. And I think someone could reach out to One Step if they wanted to pursue that option. Absolutely.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Technology, right? I always think that the fire service, in general, is always behind the curve when it comes to technology. I think about different inspection reporting platforms that I've utilized over the course of my career. Some have been great, and then some are lagging a little bit because they try to, the inspection platform or the CRR platform a lot of times is just an add-on to the operations or the fire incident reporting system, and so I think that those are definitely areas of growth that we could all see improvements in.
Yeah, from a practical application, a lot of work of an inspector is still done with pen and paper. and
Yeah.
notes form an important part of the evidence collected. Those notes then have to be digitized. So, give you an example: 20,000 inspections a year over 20 years. That's a lot of inspections. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're at a fatal fire, and you want to know what were the issues 8 years ago when there was another inspection at the same property.
Right.
Where are you going to get that information real time? So we are taking steps now to digitize all of our
Hmm.
records. That is an enormous task just in itself.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be beautiful real time? You could pull up an address in the database, get all the history, get all the notes, get all the convictions, get all the charges.
Hmm.
Boom. That's what kind of work we're working on now, to kind of centralize our database to enable us to real time look at risk. Again,
Okay.
we can't run to the finish line. It's slow and steady because, all Toronto, like any department, has challenges. We don't have an unlimited budget. So we
Right.
need to use our budget wisely and make IT and assessments to say what's the next thing we can do to improve our service level. For me, there's two goals. I want to make the job for our staff easier, give them
Hmm.
the tools and technology, and B, I want to make sure the community of Toronto is safer. That's the ultimate goal. That's why we're here.
Right.
So
Yep. Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about the fire code, or the Ontario fire code, and maybe you can shed a little bit more light on the code development process. You shared a little bit, at least as it relates back to fire investigations, and how you can then implement change that way. But how, I guess, what is the base code? Like here in California, our base code for the California Fire Code is the International Fire Code, and then we amend it to be able to address the local conditions of California. Is there a base code, or is this something that was written over, decades and or over a period of time to address fire conditions within the province or even within the city?
So our base code is the Ontario Fire Code. It's a
Okay.
code that stands alone. There's some relevance to the National Fire Code across Canada, but in Ontario, the Ontario Fire Code is the code for the province. It's been around since it used to be the Fire Marshals Act, and then in the 90s it became the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. I would say the code has been around since the 70s, and it's
Hmm.
evolved over time. So there's a couple of unique things about the fire code, and I think the fire code is phenomenal in Ontario, just to be clear, because we have something that's unique. We have retrofit. So we
Oh,
have retrofit provisions that apply to any building in Ontario that's an assembly, that's a low rise, that's a high rise, that's a hospital, that's a treatment or care facility,
hmm.
a rooming house, or a two-room duplex.
Okay.
So even if the building was built last year and it wasn't built under a building code, that's going to trigger violations of the building code. My team can still apply the provisions of retrofit and hold them
Okay.
accountable to the minimum level of standards. The rest of the code talks about maintenance provisions of the fire
Hmm.
protection equipment, and how it normally works is the province or the provincial government opens up a consultation on a it's not a set cycle. It's usually every 5 to 7 years. They open up a consultation. They allow stakeholders to provide code change requests, and
Okay.
there's a portal to submit them with your backing evidence. And then the government takes all the information and decides what they think is important as an issue. And if they decide to proceed with a code change, then they invite all the stakeholders in consultation to work out the minutia of the wording. It's a
Okay.
good process.
Yeah.
It's a little different than the International Code Council cycle. It's not, how often is it? Annual?
Yeah, it's every 3 years.
Yeah.
Right now, they're actually at the committee action hearings. Uh, we're recording this while everybody's in Orlando, going through the code development process as we speak on the fire and building codes.
Yeah. So our process is different, but what I found through experience is if you have evidence-based data to support
Hmm.
the need for a change, we've had great success.
Okay.
We've had, and I'm very proud of, again, origin, cause, circumstances,
Right.
right? And our fire data, If you're not taking the opportunity to understand why fires are occurring in your community, it's a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That means there's a failure. There's
Yeah.
something not working. How do you close the gap? Is it education? Is there a gap in the code, or is there something we're missing? Is it new technology like lithium-ion batteries?
Mm-hmm.
That's an emerging technology. The code is not caught up to address that. The education is lacking. People don't know about it. That
Mm-hmm.
has been a juggernaut for us in the last 2 years that we've been working very diligently on that space. Um, Fortunate to have a relationship with the International Association of Fire Chiefs.
Right.
I'm on the Fire and Life Safety Board, and I've got to meet some amazing colleagues in the United States. And that kind of networking gives us some, checks and balances. What's
Mm-hmm.
working, what's not working, and informs, strategies.
Right.
Like this is not just a Toronto problem; it's a North American problem. What's working
Mm-hmm.
for you? What's not working for you? And that kind of approach, you know, eliminating silos.
Yes.
Now, we all
Yep.
are, for all of us in the CRR space, we need to share.
Yeah.
We need to share with everybody because
Yep.
collectively we're going to change the behavior.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
fire problem hasn't gone away.
Right.
It really hasn't.
Yeah, and I hope with podcasts like this, or I even know that there's a is it CRR radio through CR dot or CR net, but the Vision 2020 project. I know that we're all trying to do that, trying to connect with more people, and myself from California and connecting with you in Toronto. Hopefully that will help us kind of see how other jurisdictions are handling CRR and what measures they're implementing to be able to address it. And hopefully, moving forward, there will be, these kind of comprehensive strategies as we go to move forward. Because I know that when I came to California and I started looking at trying to do a CRA on myself by myself, it was difficult. I looked at it and I knew it was a major undertaking, and thankfully I was able to get some grant funding to be able to help assist me in doing that. But yeah, it's but being able to do it and not talk to others, I think, is definitely a challenge. And I think we definitely need to network and collaborate a lot more.
I fully agree. I just looked, we just wrapped up. I got the final report for our community risk assessment update last week, to be example. And the team that undertook this update, I believe there was 10 people assigned to it full
Wow.
time. It was a huge undertaking, but the effort is it's worth it because it
Yeah.
truly gives you a snapshot of where your risks are in the community
Yep.
and maybe validates, okay, maybe that risk is gone. Let's
Yeah.
stop doing that. Now
Yep.
let's put our very precious resources on and focus on another risk. But you need to always have that checks and balances. Okay,
Absolutely.
I'll repeat myself again. How much are you doing? How well are you doing? And who is better off? And like a broken record, if you can't answer those three, I ain't doing it.
Yeah. Well, we will clip that and we will definitely put it out there in the social media sphere so that way more people can understand the Toronto way and the Toronto mantra. Now, you talked a little bit about lithium ion batteries. I definitely want to talk about that because that is one of those emerging trends, right? Especially as we talk about powered mobility devices, but really lithium ion batteries are, widespread throughout our entire lives. I mean, I've seen stories. I saw a story last week about a battery from a vacuum that started a fire in a home in Austin that caused significant damage. The week before, there was a lithium-ion battery in a pair of heated gloves that caught fire at an eye clinic in North Dakota. And so, the widespread nature of lithium ion batteries, and not only just in powered mobility, but just in devices in general, what's your perspective? What have we learned over the last several years, really in trying to understand how to manage these fires, but also manage these devices so that way they can be used safely?
Well, I've learned a lot about lithium ion batteries, and I recall about 2 years ago speaking with Chief O'Brien out of Brighton, Michigan on the IFC, and he was talking about lithium ion batteries, and I made the mistake of saying, we don't have that problem in Toronto. I made that mistake because shortly thereafter they started to surface. And what I realized is you may not even know what's occurring in your
Yeah.
community if you're not looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we initially did is implemented tracking measures and educated our frontline crews to explain to them what an LIB is and have them start reporting it. And sure enough, our first year we saw 8 fires from LIBs. The following year in 2022, we saw 21. And last year we saw 55 significant
Wow.
fires. So a dramatic increase. I just looked at it right now. As of April, we're year to date the same as last year. We're sitting around 16 fires.
Okay.
So it's an ongoing issue and it's multifaceted. So a
Mm-hmm.
couple of 4 key issues we're seeing here in Toronto is number one is lack of mandated certification requirements for the sale and purchase of these
Mm-hmm.
batteries. I don't think that's a requirement in the United States, nor is it in Canada. Number two is the alteration of these batteries. People are altering them,
Yep.
and fires are occurring. Number three, they're being disposed of in garbage at end of life, and we're having
Yep.
trash fires and compact fires. And number four, overcharging.
Yeah.
You know, and we're having these significant fires. So there's 3 approaches to this. Number one, we have to educate the public. These aren't
Mm-hmm.
normal batteries. These are increased risk. There's an increased risk to life and safety. Number two, we had to train our crews to recognize them, and also, what do you do post fire?
Yeah.
The risk of thermal runaway. We had an incident where the fire occurred. Our investigators were engaged. Batteries reignited 2 days later. Fast forward, that same bunch of batteries, because it was a warehouse housing e-bikes,
Mm-hmm.
those batteries were piled into a transport trailer pending disposal because they had to figure out how to dispose of it. Those same batteries reignited 87 days later.
Wow.
So that
87 days.
87 days. So that incident was a wake-up call for us, and we implemented robust training and protocols. So what we do is that when we have a fire, incident commanders and crews are trained to ask the owners, do you have LIB batteries? And
Mm-hmm.
if they do and they're exposed to fire, we call our hazmat team in and we package them and they're safely removed to the exterior, and then arrangements are made to have them picked up by the owner. So we've
Mm-hmm.
got some mitigation and post-fire protocols in place. We've got robust public education. In fact, we have a big campaign launching this year that we've hired a professional agency to develop an ad campaign for us, and we're launching it across the city and sharing it with the entire province. And in fact, the creative will be shared with the IAFC as well. So
Okay.
I'm going to be allowing it to be shared across whoever wants it, use it, put your name on it. It's not me
Mm-hmm.
allowing, the city is, because it's all about
Right.
changing behavior and,
Right.
and share the opportunity to educate the public. So educate the public, train operations response staff to mitigate the risk. And then number three, train the inspectors how to address this new risk. They need to know what tools they need to issue
Mm-hmm.
orders and unsafe applications, and how to minimize the risk. And then finally, advocate for code change, both
Yeah.
at the federal and provincial level, to deal with this emerging risk. It's been a great journey. I got to tell
Yeah.
you, been fortunate to be involved in the IFC and got this exposure. It's really helped us develop protocols and combat this issue. But it's the journey's not done. We got a
Yeah.
long way to go.
Yeah, I would say that relationship with the IAFC is definitely mutually beneficial, right? Between us and Canada, or and I say us, but I mean the United States and Canada, to be able to we're all dealing with a lot of the similar hazards. You mentioned earlier the encampments. We have issues associated with that. We have the similar issues associated with lithium-ion batteries and the impacts that they're having on our communities. And I know here in the States, a lot of local jurisdictions have definitely started taking, at least developing regulations and guidelines to help address those impacts. They have been like the city of New York, New York State, California. We've definitely all been trying to find ways to better address those, so that way we can hopefully be able to mitigate them moving forward. And one of those emerging technologies.
Well, for us, it's micromobility devices. Our
Yeah.
data, electric vehicles aren't an issue for us.
Right.
We're having very few EV fires. In fact, anything I've seen of late is from a motor vehicle collision, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. You're damaging the battery package that's not intended. But
Yeah.
failures, we're not seeing them. in Toronto
Yeah.
at all. What we're seeing in the majority of all those fires I talked about are all micro mobility, and everyone's embracing green energy.
Yeah.
Reduce
Yep.
carbon footprint. And think about an e-bike or an e-scooter, the freedom it gives someone from a relatively low cost. But
Yeah.
with that prevalence or popularity and the lack of certification and the lack of knowledge, it just
Hmm.
opens up the risk. And now people are charging them in their bedrooms while they're sleeping at night. And
Yeah.
partners like the Fire Safety Research Institute are doing a really good job to provide that scientific evidence on the failure mechanisms and
Yeah.
increase awareness to the public. It's challenging. And I think our biggest challenge is going to be the micromobility space.
Yeah.
It's going so fast, but I'm hopeful. There's some amazing fire scientists in the world, and I'm hearing about promising technologies that will reduce risk. And I think if we get to that space of solid state or safer technology,
Hmm.
I'm hoping we don't have this conversation anymore,
Yeah.
right? If you
Yep.
think about the evolution of gasoline in the first combustion vehicle in 1903 that was commercially available, do
Yep.
you think they figured out the risks and the volatility of gasoline back then?
No.
No. They
No.
had explosions and massive
Yep.
fires and train derailments. And then they realized, oh, we better make some code changes and come up with it took decades.
Yeah.
I think we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Technology is faster than regulation.
Yeah, this is kind of a new revolution, right? We always talk about the industrial revolution. I would say that this is a new type of revolution in the sense of this micromobility space, this battery energy storage space. And I always tell people, I agree with you. I think the majority of the fires that we're seeing are empowered mobility devices, right?
Mhm.
Those micromobility devices. But there is a line to be drawn between an EV, a battery energy storage system, and then these devices. And I think that that's what's really important. I mean, we still see the occasional fire associated with any of those other items, even other consumer electronics such as cell phones and laptops and those types of things. But a lot of it has to do with education. How do we educate the community? I did see a story, I believe yesterday or a couple days ago. It was in the UK, I believe. I'd have to go back and check. But they had a battery or an electric bike fire at a train station on the platform, and the gentleman had just purchased it just a few months ago off the Facebook Marketplace. And that's those secondary marketplaces that we buy things. It looks great. We get it home. We use it for a little bit, and then we have catastrophic outcomes like this.
Absolutely. My New Year's Eve this year, we had a lithium-ion bike failure on a occupied subway train in the city of Toronto.
Yeah.
So it was thankfully no one was critically injured because the failure occurred at the same moment that the train reached the platform and people were allowed to egress. What's interesting with the risk of LIB, it's just the speed in which this technology is coming out. We can't keep up with educating the public,
Mm-hmm.
right, in what the risks are associated with it. And
Yeah.
you know, lithium ion batteries don't do well in the cold.
Mm-mm.
They don't do well if they're impregnated, affected by water. We live in a cold climate in Canada. It's I go Celsius, minus 30 Celsius in the middle of winter. That's cold.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't know that you have that open and you drive it out in the cold, and all the all the warning says don't charge it while it's cold, it can create a failure. If you don't know that and you just who reads the instructions and plug it in, and that's where
Yep.
we're getting some of these issues. Um, Another risk, you talk about emerging risks. So I talked about the 3,060 high rises.
Mm-hmm.
A majority of those have parking decks that are underground.
Yeah.
I'm not saying EVs are a high risk. They're not, because we're
Right.
not seeing the failure. What I'm saying is they're a risk of adding to the fuel load. Even though the heat release rate of an electric vehicle and a combustion are relatively similar,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges of suppression are different. So you have
Yeah.
an accidental fire in a car and it happens to then expose an EV. Thankfully, in Ontario, all of our underground parking garages are sprinklered. So that'll
Okay.
help us in kind of mitigating that risk. But here's the
Yeah.
challenge. You're 6, 7 floors underground. You have an EV fire. There's challenges of suppression. You put it
Mm-hmm.
out and then it's going to reignite.
Yep.
How do you get that car out?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
what's that
seriously.
mechanism? Yeah, I have seen there was a department out of Colorado that they used one of the fire blankets. They loaded it up on a flatbed, bed, and then they took it out. And then even at the wrecking yard, it was still reigniting, but it at least gave them an opportunity to hopefully, be able to take it from the home, put it on the flatbed, and then get it out of the neighborhood. So that way they could then further suppress it or let it kind of burn itself out.
Yeah, and that raises another interesting challenge. This new
Yeah.
technology it creates new problems, and then there's a whole
Yep.
marketplace of solutions
Yes. Yes.
that are driven by the economy that are not
Yes.
certified. So we
Yep.
don't want our people to be in harm's way and give them a piece
Right.
of PP or equipment that's not certified,
Right.
right? You may be
Yeah.
adding to the problem. So the issue is like it's an ideal H environment. You're not going to send a
Mm-hmm.
tow truck driver down there.
Mm-mm.
So what's the
No.
solution? You
Yeah.
can't have crews there for 18 hours.
No.
That's not a good use of resources.
Right.
And there's going to be a risk of ongoing reignition with a thermal runaway.
Yep.
Those are the problems that we need to come up with solutions before we're sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning in an underground parking garage, right? And that we don't
Trying
have
to
that
figure it
answer
out.
yet.
Yeah.
We don't have that answer yet. So, but I'm
No.
confident there's a lot of smart people in this world that
Yep.
collectively will come up with something, or alternatively, solid state will come into effect and the risk will be mitigated.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Fingers
think that
crossed.
we're definitely on that cusp of that next great technology, right? To be able to, we're understanding that the current technology, there are hazards associated with it, and there are people always exploring. I think I've seen anywhere from sodium batteries to batteries that utilize some type of saltwater mixture as their electrolyte mixture to be able to hopefully suppress a fire should it happen. So there's a lot of them out there right now, and I think that given the issues that we've had with them, that we're going to start seeing some more of that. We're going to start seeing more technology associated with that. But even the solutions, as you mentioned, a lot of them are non-certified or non-listed or non-approved solutions. So how do we get those solutions certified? How do we find ways to be able to mitigate these incidents, especially moving forward?
Yeah, and like any new technology, if there's a financial opportunity, there's always going to be snake oil vendors. They
Yes.
want to make that quick buck, and at the end of
Yep.
the day, as fire professionals, we have to, have that cautious second look and say, hey, does this make sense? Does the
Yeah.
fire science support it? And you're fortunate in the United States. The Fire Safety Research Institute does some
Mm-hmm.
amazing stuff. I
Yeah.
only wish to have the budget they have to do the testing they do, but that evidence and that research is going to make us better
Yeah.
because we're going to be relying on evidence-based data to support our decisions as leaders. So
Yes.
we ensure we're doing the right thing to protect our people, but also protect the community. And the technology is happening fast. We don't want to be rushing to find solutions that are actually faulty
Right.
because we're not solving anyone's problem at that point. But those are the
Yeah.
kind of examples, and I'm proud in Toronto. We put together a huge team of interdivision team to address the LIB problem. We had an
Mm-hmm.
inter-working group, and then we expanded to an external working group and invited a whole bunch of government agencies, and it has been a complete success because we're getting input from the ULs and the community out there and the service providers, and we're coming up with techniques and solutions to solve our problem, and at the same time educating everyone, and more importantly, um, you know, sharing the knowledge
Right.
so we understand the risk. So
Yeah. Well, Chief, we are almost at an hour.
wow.
I had so many other questions, but I will save that for for maybe an upcoming episode with you and I talking a little bit more about public education, and the outreach efforts in Toronto. I definitely want to hear about that. But with that being said, where can people find more information about Toronto Fire's efforts in community risk reduction and the good things that you guys are doing, on the opposite side of the border?
We issue an annual report every year. It's quite an extensive annual report. So you can go to just Google Toronto Fire 2022 annual report. I believe our 2023 should be out in the next couple of weeks, and that provides an overview of all the efforts, activities, tracking that we do in the city. And yeah, you could also go to Google Toronto Fire. It'll bring you to our website. So
Yeah, and I'm going to be looking forward to the lithium-ion battery awareness campaign that you're going to be starting. I know that the city of New York has a Charge Safe campaign. UL and the Fire Service Research Institute also has another safety campaign. But I'll also be looking forward to seeing Toronto Fire Safety campaign as we continue to move forward, especially in this space. So.
Absolutely, and we're blessed to have partnered with the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office and the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs. So we're doing this collaborative effort to get the message out across the entire province. So I'm looking forward to it. We're launching that in June of this year. So
Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, Chief, I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'll mention it again. We'll definitely have a part two to talk a little bit more about CRR. So,
absolutely, would love to come back. Thank you.
all right. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.